You still have some exceptions. The two exceptions that we mentioned before are still there, and the fact that, transportation and motor vehicles are still being investigated by other agencies so that they don't get involved with that. However, if a fatality happens 30 days after the incident, then it's not going to be reported. It's going to be recorded, but not reported to OSHA, so you don't have to report it to them, okay? And that could be, somebody got really severely injured, they're in the hospital, all of a sudden they take a turn for the worst. It happens after 30 days after the event. You don't have to report that to OSHA within 8 hours or anything. Any hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye that occur 24 hours after the incident. Okay, so again, if something happens and they had a pretty severe injury, they're trying to take care of that, but the injury gets worse, now they have to do an amputation or something like that. That wouldn't be something that you're going to record if it's over 24 hours. Report. You're going to record, you're not going to report. And any hospitalization for diagnostic testing or observation only is not going to be part of that. So if somebody got hurt, got a bump on the head, and they decide to keep them in the hospital overnight just to make sure that they're doing all right, that, unless they're doing some kind of a treatment process in there, then that would not be something that you would report. Okay, but it's any hospitalization other than that. So if they're in there for treatment, even though it's just overnight, even if it's one person, you're still going to record that. All right, so I also give you the information here as to the two phone numbers. So if I can, I would prefer to talk to someone live in the state that knows kind of what's going on and things like that. So if I call, I like to call the area office. This is their direct line to the area office, okay? But if you're required to report it within 8 hours of that incident, it might be after hours because they only man that office from 8 to 5. So in that particular case, it might be that you need to call the 24-hour hotline, and that's that 1-800 number that you see down there, okay? So you want to keep both of those numbers handy. All right, so here's the information they want as well. This is stuff that you would already have. Establishment name, where the incident happened, type of recordable event, how many people were involved, what were their names, the contact person, and then a brief description of that incident. So that's all they really want to know, is something to go off of, and then they're going to come probably in for a visit to see what's going on exactly, okay? So it's just one way of taking a look at that. All right, so let's talk about the actual recording part of this process then, because that also changed. So if you take a look at in your book, one of the things that I did was I divided the book up into 3 sections, and I covered all that other information. One of the things is in the back of the book, I do have that appendices section. In that section, I included this whole pamphlet here that deal with the OSHA recording. So we're going to go to that here in a little bit, but I just wanted to talk about some of the things in here, and the fact of you're required to maintain 5 years of OSHA logs. So that would include the OSHA Form 300, a privacy case list if you have one, if one exists, if you're tracking things that particular way. OSHA Form 300A, which is your summary, which you're going to post, and your 301. And again, if you use your first report, then you would need to maintain those first reports with this information for 5 years as well. Okay? So currently, we're at the end of the year, so you should be tracking, you should have on file 2009 to 2013, you should be working on 2014. Once we get past this year and we get into 2015 in January, now you should be finishing up your documentation on your 300. At that particular point in time, you drop off 2009 data, 2014 then takes its place, so you're going from 2010 to 2014, and now you start tracking your 2015 information. Okay. Now keep in mind, even if you don't have something happen during the year, you still have to maintain the forms. You would still put the date, you still put the name of the organization and everything else, you just have zeros on it. Okay. But you still maintain it to show that you are tracking it. Okay. Some employers are partially exempt from this process. Okay. And when I say partially exempt, that's because OSHA and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reserves the right to ask you to fill out that form for you at any particular point in time. And this kind of gets confusing because when they first started doing this, I was getting clients that were calling me up saying, hey, I got somebody from Kansas City that wants my information. And I'm like, there is not a federal agency in Kansas City, so let's not send anything until I clear this up. Come to find out, that's where OSHA has all their information. That's the location that they collect all of that information that they collect. Of course, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, they have that information sent to Washington, D.C. All right, they're using the information in two different ways. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is actually taking that information and they're setting the industry standards or the industry rates. They're taking that information and that's how they set the industry rate. OSHA is actually collecting it for particular companies and they're measuring those companies against that national rate to see how they match up. And then what they're doing is that, we'll talk about it, but they're doing site-specific targeting off of that information, okay? So it's something to keep in mind that they are requesting that information from different companies from time to time. Sometimes it doesn't feel so random, but that it is supposed to be random, that they put it into the computer and that kicks out who they're going to ask and things like that. So an employer with 10 or less employees, and what we're talking about is FTEs throughout the year, so that if you have a number of employees throughout the year, say this is your slow time, and then you get to the point to where during your seasonal stuff you have more employees. If you have over 10, you're not partially exempt, but if you're 10 or under, you're partially exempt until they ask for that particular form to be filled out and sent in. Employers in certain industries. Now here's where the next change came into play. Employers in certain industries were exempt as well, and they've done that by sick code in the past. So currently these are the folks that are not required to maintain an injury log anymore, okay? Now what has happened though, as of January 1st, they're no longer using the standard industry classification code. Now they've gone to the NAICS code, and the NAICS code is the North American Industry Classification System code. And it's because of all the other things we've done. Now this is covering all of North America. These different codes, they went from a maximum of 4 digits to a maximum of 6 digits now. So they're actually including more. So if you think about it, here's all the ones that they exempted the last time. This is the amount of stuff that's exempted this time. And they did it based on that industry's injury rates, okay? So that they felt that these particular organizations weren't having that high of injuries, so they want to track other organizations that have higher industry rates, and so they gave these guys a pass. Now, every couple years they're going to come back and revisit this, and they'll change this again to document what needs to be taken care of past this point, okay? Now, what they also did in this process is they went ahead and identified for us, these are the companies or the type of industries that were exempted before. Now they're going to be required to fill them out. So you'll have to, if you're curious if you were on this list or off of this list or where you're at, you would need to go out and find out what your NAICS code is. And off of that, then you would go in and determine whether or not this is something that you should record or shouldn't be recording. And in some cases, you're going to have to make a determination. If you've got a company that has maybe 2 different types of classification codes, you may end up having to keep it for one or the other. Now, if you're predominantly one, then that's understandable. But if you're kind of equally based across the board, you might be exempt in one situation but have to maintain it in another, okay?